Imagine being unable to say, I am hungry, I am in pain, thank you, or I love you, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone.
Martin Pistorius spent over a decade trapped inside his own body, conscious and aware, but unable to communicate. Growing up, Martin had a normal childhood.
He told us when he was 3 that he was going to be an electric man when he grew up.
Until, at 12 years old, he contracted an infection in his brain that doctors weren't able to explain or treat.
And he came up to me and said, I'm not feeling well. And then he never, ever went back to school again.
Martin's health began deteriorating, and he eventually entered a vegetative state that doctors said he'd be in for the rest of his life.
I thought my child had died, even though he wasn't dead. I tried to commit suicide because I just couldn't handle it anymore.
However, 4 years into this state, Martin's mind began to hear, see, and understand everything happening around him again.
It is sort of like an image which is grey and completely out of focus, then gradually the colors start to trickle back, and the image becomes clearer and clearer, until it is crystal clear and in vibrant color.
But Martin was still physically paralyzed and unable to communicate this with anyone around him.
But when I realized that my attempts to communicate weren't being noticed, I eventually basically gave up trying.
Martin watched silently as his parents struggled, his mother even telling him she wished he would die, not realizing he could understand every word.
My mother turned to me and told me I must die.
I did actually say those words to him.
Taking care of Martin became too much for his parents, so they decided to send him to care facilities.
It's a very dark place to find yourself because, in a sense, you have vanished.
Martin was subjected to abuse at the care centers, suffering physical and emotional trauma, unable to communicate or defend himself.
I was hit, pinched, manhandled, shouted at, intentionally dropped, and so on. I was also with no way to communicate. I became the perfect victim.
Then, after 9 years, everything changed. A nurse named Werner van der Walt noticed something no one else had. Martin was reacting to her words.
When you spoke to him, you could see his eyes are talking back to you. There was a sparkle in it.
She refused to believe he was gone and started working with him, recognizing small, deliberate movements as attempts to communicate.
So for him to actually trust me enough to even try to communicate, that's just amazing. I'm happy he did.
Over time, Werner developed a system with Martin to help him communicate using subtle nods and eye movements.
He didn't just learn slowly, he ran. He just took in all this information.
This led to more advanced communication tools, and Martin began to reclaim his life.
But as I began to communicate more, I realized that it was in fact only just the beginning of creating a new voice for myself.
Martin was able to graduate university and became a motivational speaker.
I think probably the scariest thing for me was I couldn't really see that this would ever change.
But Martin's greatest accomplishment was finding love. He met Joanna, a woman who saw past his physical limitations.
I never really thought all worried about nobody realizing that I was an intelligent person. I just didn't want to die alone.
Martin proposed to her during a hot air balloon ride, and Joanna said yes.
So will you do me the honor, the enormous privilege of sharing the rest of my life with me by becoming my wife?
I feel like saying yes again.
Today, Martin lives in the UK with Joanna, running a web design business, advocating for those with disabilities, and even wrote a book called Ghost Boy, detailing his incredible journey.